What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here, joined by a very special guest who needs no introduction, but I will give him one anyway. Mr. Andrew Brandt, former Packers executive, host of the Business of Sports podcast, and a general knower of all things when it comes to the business of football, sports, what have you. Andrew, how are you today, man?
I'm good. Always be with you, Aaron. It's nice to talk Packers because, I've told you this before. I'm obviously not up there. I'm not doing Packers full time, but when I write, talk, podcast about the Packers, I get two responses. I get Packers fans saying, "Why don't you do this more often?"
Mm.
And I get the other half saying, "Why do you do so much Packers?"
Right.
So it's kind of the
Uh,
reaction. It's like the reaction to the stock certificate.
oh, yeah.
Packers non-Packers fans are biggest waste of money ever.
Mm-hmm.
Packers fans are most prized possession I own.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I
that's
mean,
that's the
mine's right over
dichotomy.
there. So,
Yeah,
look, I mean, I think when it comes to the Packers, they're always going to be a draw. I think we've seen that now play out with the transition from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love, where people thought, okay, well, this might be kind of the waning moments of the Packers' kind of prevalence, as it were, on the national stage. But you saw last year, they seem to have found another guy, and I think Packers are going to be a going concern, as it were, going forward. Although, funny, we should start with this because we wanted to talk to you today about the Sunday ticket verdict and the ongoing undoubted kind of appeal from the league of this decision.
right.
There's a lot to dive into here. I just want to try to separate some fact from fiction when it comes to the headlines that are being generated around this case, what it means for the Packers, and generally just how long this will take to play out. Because I think, given the sudden influx of coverage, because this has been going on for a very long time,
Very long.
but now all of a sudden there's a lot of kind of news around this
Yeah.
because of the verdict, etc. People feel like, oh, something's about to happen, and it's like, no, we've got a long way to go when it comes to how this is going to play out.
Let me just give 2 minutes on the subject matter.
Please.
So back in 1961, sounds like I'm an old man there. Um, there
Wayback
was this,
Machine.
yeah, the Sports Broadcasting Act that allowed teams to act collectively. So teams did not have to do their own broadcast deals; it would be done collectively. So basically, you needed an antitrust exemption to do that, and Congress gave the NFL one, and Pete Rozelle. And all of a sudden, you're not negotiating with the Cowboys or the Packers or the Broncos. You're negotiating with the league. And every game you see, any watchers, listeners see on television, is a national game. It's not a local game. So that's where we've been. The NFL argued through this case that, as you mentioned, started way back in 2015, that the Sunday ticket, the out of market package, should be treated the same as the in market package, which is collective. We can sell it all. And we don't have to parcel out the Cowboys to the Cowboys games and the Packers to the Packers games. We'll just do it like we did it. And 9 years later, through a lot of ups and downs, the verdict from the jury, and I'll get back to jury versus judge
Mm.
in a minute, was that no, you can't. That's different. You can't package these out of market games. You conspired, NFL, with Fox, CBS, ESPN, etc., to create this extra tier where they're paying overpriced packages to get these games rather than $80 a year to get Packers games, $60 a year to get Bengals games, whatever it may be. And that was the theories of the case. Now we have a verdict. Okay. Here's what I've been trying to tell people for the last 3 days. Don't hold your breath for payment.
Right.
Three way. And listen, I've talked to people who've talked to senior NFL people who are telling them the same thing I'm telling you, which is relax.
Mm.
3 courses. Number one, go back to this judge. This judge, during the case, according to reports, seemed very favorable to the NFL.
Like
Like
vocally in the like courtroom itself.
in the courtroom, it was not for him to decide, it was for the jury to decide. But I won't get too legalese, but there's something called judgment notwithstanding the verdict. The NFL will appeal for him to overrule the jury and dismiss the liability for the NFL. That could happen. They will also ask, if not that, reduce the award. It's not going to be 4.7 billion. It'll be something far less. If they don't get that, then we get to appeals. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, when will that be heard? Who knows? Maybe 6 months, maybe 9 months, maybe 14 months. And if it doesn't go well there, yes, all the way to the Supreme Court, and all the jokes come in about Clarence Thomas wanting a
No.
Super Bowl ring, or, that will happen. So years
Indeed.
away, years
Right.
away. Now, people are asking, well, even if it's an appeal, does the NFL have to pay? They would ask for a stay of the judgment while they appeal. And again, I'm not a trial lawyer. I would sense the judge would be empathetic to that, especially the way he was in trial. I would doubt that while they're appealing, they're having to paying this out. And then if we get to worst case scenario, I know everyone's interested in what about the money.
Mm.
There would be payment at some point. It would not have to be immediate. So say it's 400 million per team or whatever it is. It's not coming out 1 year. It's over time, and it's not coming out, especially in the Packers case, of a bank account. It will be paid out by the NFL, which would siphon it from the teams. And the way they would siphon it, this is how they've done other awards, like a concussion settlement,
Right.
is reduced distributions. So every year, each team's getting 400 plus million as their share of media deals, sponsorship deals, licensing deals, etc. So it's not like the Packers or every team's going to write a check. They're just going to get less from the distributions, if and when that ever happens. So,
Which it might not.
okay,
Exactly. We've got such a long way to go. And this is the thing I've been trying to. The whole reason I wanted to talk to you today, because I mentioned before we started, I've gotten many messages already from Packers fans
me
asking
too.
about not
Me too.
just like for the league and what it means for fans, but for the Packers in particular. And you've laid it out very nicely there. And that's the real kind of crux of the issue when it comes to. I know there are certain members of the media out there, our good friend, old buddy Mike Florio, already stirring the pot with a post this morning regarding, well, if the Packers had to pay $400 million, which, as you're pointing out here, would not happen in one fell swoop. But even then, I don't think Mike understands, as usual, how the Packers actually operate. And the fact that not only are they, getting this collective money, this influx every year, as we know from looking at the books every year, the only team where we get to see
Right.
what transpires as far as what they're actually getting from the league, but also the rainy day fund, the investment fund, whatever you want to call it, that exists for this exact type
Right.
of reason.
Right.
Like, it's not sitting there waiting like, oh, we got to go sign a big free agent. It's about literally keeping something in reserve if the solvency of the team, franchise, what have you, were ever to be put in jeopardy. And I don't think it will be in this regard, but that's literally what that fund is all about.
Yeah, and pivoting off that, there are two questions I've gotten a lot of from Packer fans and all fans over the weekend. Number one, will this change the way we view? Will this change broadcast deals? And again, no time, anytime soon.
Soon, right?
The YouTube just started with the package. They're going to be continuing that until something changes a long way from now. So you're not going to be able to buy just Packer games. Again, for me personally, that's a problem, but it's the way it is. And then the second question is, what about the salary cap? Not only for the Packers, but generally, what about the cap? Listen, the cap, which I managed for 10 years up there, is revenues. It doesn't matter what the expenses are. Sometimes the expenses are big 1 year, small 1 year, a renovation 1 year, not the expenses are separate. So the cap is based completely on revenues and divvying it up with the players and coming out to whatever the number is. So that's not an issue. The other thing I'll say about this trial is that, yes, it's a slow time in the business. People are getting hip to the trial. But again, July 31st is the next date. And that date can only go better for the NFL than the other stuff. That's when they appeal to the judge to A, reduce the award, B, dismiss the case, C, something in between. And then we'll hear something probably in August to September on that. And then the appeals will start. And again, reiterating it, I doubt there'll be any payment done while appealing. So next time we visit this case, maybe 2025 at least.
Yeah, and what's funny to me, the idea that the NFL won't exhaust every avenue, which of course they will, and they have been almost. I'm not going to say undefeated, but they've been close to 100% batting 1,000, whatever you want to call it, when they do go to appeal. Anybody who's followed the CBA negotiations over the year, or anything having to do with dealings with
Yeah.
the PA, they they almost always lose at this level, and then the
Yeah. I
moment
mean,
they get to the Ninth Circuit, that's a win for the league.
that
Almost
was,
always.
as you know so well, Aaron, that was my entry into media when I left the Packers and ESPN brought me in to cover just that.
Right.
What does this mean? CBA lock? What does that mean? And every time, you're right, district court, even Tom Brady, you get this jock judge, like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, but the league always told us. I remember the Maurice Claret case,
Oh wow.
2003.
Right.
And oh my God, I had John Dorsey, Reggie McKenzie, John Schneider, Ted Thompson, everyone in my office. Wow. We gotta recruit freshmen. We gotta study high schoolers. We gotta study. And there's no limits. And I'm like saying what the NFL said to me, like, relax. We're going to the Second Circuit, and Judge Sonia Sotomayor ruled on behalf of the NFL that the draft eligibility rules are fine, and Maurice Claret is out of luck, and all the worry gone. Now,
All
listen,
gone.
the NFL had bad facts in a case against St. Louis, and they knew they had bad facts because the NFL played fast and loose with the relocation guidelines in their zeal to get to LA, and they
Right.
just stole the franchise. This time, if they had bad facts, they would have settled. I'm convinced these lawyers that are paid thousands of dollars an hour
Right.
know this was not a bad facts case. And, again, kudos to the NFL for settling St. Louis, settling the massive concussion global settlement, which could have been really bad facts. And I'm trusting their lawyers to know that this case was not ripe for settlement. And here we go.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I did want to kind of get your view on this, because looking from the outside in, and I have only been kind of following along as obviously a very detached observer, reading news reports, what have you, going back to when this first started, because
Right.
I think emotionally as a fan, and I think this is probably what happened with the jury, it doesn't make sense. As a fan, I want the option to buy just my
Right.
team. Like, that makes all the sense in the world. The problem, if you are able to kind of detach yourself from your fandom and be dispassionate about it and really view what the NFL has always done, going back to, like you're saying, the 1961 Act, the fact that the NFL exists in its own bubble. It has basically since the advent of putting it on television. They exist in their own world legally. So it's hard if you're, again, dispassionate about it. Well, we made this deal. We, being Congress, the United States government, made this deal with the NFL. Yeah, you can exist over there.
Right.
And I don't see anything here with what they've done with the Sunday ticket, which, again, I hate, but I don't see anything that kind of violates that agreement. As far as we agree with the PA that we exist in our own little kind of world, that we will govern ourselves, etc. And I know, obviously, that's a very 30,000-foot view of it,
Yeah.
but that's what we've agreed as a society and as a government that the NFL is allowed to do. I think that's the product that we have to deal with, as far as, like, yeah, the Sunday ticket thing sucks,
Yeah.
but we gave them this authority, essentially.
And we're talking to the right audience here because, listen, as I know better than anyone, the Green Bay Packers exist because of what you just said.
Yep.
They only exist because the NFL's mantra is one for all for one, and we only exist to serve our weakest link. Can you imagine, maybe not today, but in the past, if the Packers had to sell their media rights alone to a market of 100,000 versus markets of 20 million? I mean, this is something that people underestimate. This is the reason why we have the greatest story in sports in Green Bay. That could never happen. Never happen
No,
in any other sport, in
ever.
any other league today. It was grandfathered in back in the 40s, and here we are, where the Packers get the same share as New York teams and LA teams and Cowboys. So the collective action that I started the podcast talking about by Congress in 1961 was obviously lobbied for by Pete Rozelle and Pick a name, Art Modell
Right.
or the Rooneys or the Maras who understood this. So yes, I'm exactly like you, Aaron. As a fan, I'm pissed. I'm paying 300 plus instead of what could be $50. But as a lawyer, I understand it. And yes, I'm not denigrating juries, but the jury's looking at this like big bad corporate NFL
Right.
and us consumers. I get it. I get it. And I don't know the whole facts and I didn't follow the trial. It wasn't that out there.
Hmm.
But as a lawyer, I understand why it seemed like all the reports, you got the judge in the case kind of not really empathetic to the plaintiff. So
And
we'll
hiding it,
see.
not
But
hiding
it
it.
is
Yeah.
exactly what you said. It's lawyer versus fan is a different look at this.
While I've got you, I can't thank you enough for the time, Andrew.
Of course.
Always great to talk Packers with you, NFL, etc. I did want to ask you about the recent headline from the Green Bay Packers regarding the vote to make ed policy officially. I think this has been long assumed, rumored, what have you, but ed policy now the official successor to Mark
Yeah.
Murphy. Have you worked with Ed at any capacity throughout your tenure in covering the NFL, working in the NFL? What do you think? What kind of job do you think he'll do? What type of person do you think he is, as far as being a steward for the Green Bay Packers going forward?
Two things to get out of the way. I'm getting these questions a lot. Number one, I was not a candidate. So I just want
Right.
everyone to know that. I had a great life in Green Bay. It was a chapter of my life, not my life. I have the fondest memories, but I was not a candidate here, and I was in 2008. I do admit that, but I was not at this point. The other thing is, I knew Ed when he was AFL commissioner when I was at the Packers, and we knew that. He came 2 years after I left the Packers. But this is something I heard, and I think you heard as well. He was the leader in the clubhouse this entire search.
Mhm.
Yes, they had a search firm. Yes, they were talking to a lot of people. Yes, they were doing interviews. But I heard he was kind of the pole position the entire way. Very well thought of both internally with Mark and with the executive committee and externally. Now, externally, the league doesn't know him as well as inside the Packers, but they obviously know his dad, from
Just a little bit,
49ers and Browns. They
right?
knew Ed when he was a teenager coming to league meetings. And they know the name, of course, and they've heard how much he's respected in Green Bay. So it's a solid choice. I just want people to understand his job. I was general counsel, he's general counsel, but very different. I was football general counsel, now replaced by Russ Ball, which is team contracts, player contracts, managing the salary cap, dealing with the management council on player issues, player fines, player discipline, player grievances, disputes. He's more corporate counsel. So he does licensing and sponsorship deals. He deals with local politics. He deals with real estate. He deals with stadium contracts of all sizes and shapes, slip and fall suits against the Packers. So he's really coming in on the administrative business side. So my point in pointing this out is that I think the Packers will continue, as they have since I was there in the 90s, deferring to football operations for anything football. And I
Mhm.
know there was stuff made about Mark getting more involved, and obviously
Mhm.
that person picks the coach. But I just think it's an incredible deferential treatment of football compared to other teams around the league, where it was Ron Wolf, Ted Thompson, Brian Gutekunst having virtual full control over the team and no interference. Now, again, the title is above it, but what I've seen over the years is that it's deference. The president and executive committee, they worry about the pro shop, they worry about league business, they worry about revenues, expenses. Football's over there. And it's worked, obviously. And I think that will continue to be the plan.
Well, Andrew, as someone who grew up in the Bart Starr as a coach era, and
Right.
knowing that he was going in front of the executive committee and the board every Monday morning to defend his game plans, I
Mhm.
can't tell you how excited I am at the prospect of not returning to those days. That's
Yeah.
I don't want the business side involved on the football side in any way, shape, or form. Andrew, I really appreciate the time. Make sure you're checking out Andrew's work. I'll have a link in the description of this video. Andrew, thanks so much, man.
Always enjoyed, Aaron. Talk to you soon.